Hey everyone, Kyle Walker here. If you love cars, fixing things, or just want to understand your vehicle better, you're in the right place. I share hands-on tips, smart driving advice, and straight-up car talk without the fluff. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and stick around till the end. You don't want to miss what's coming up. Let's get into
Markings
it.
in the form of yellow parallel lines intersecting at right angles and forming a kind of grid appeared on the streets of Moscow in 2015. The project, the authorship of which belongs to the ProBook Expert Center, was implemented in order to test the possibilities of solving the problem of traffic jams at intersections. 3 fairly busy traffic interchanges in the capital were chosen for the experiment. The result was half-hearted. Traffic jams did not go away, but the passage of intersections, as well as junctions with more complex type of intersection, was simplified. And already in the spring of 2018, the traffic rules were amended, in which the term waffle marking received an official interpretation. Alas, but most drivers still have a poor understanding of how to pass intersections with such markings. This is partly due to the somewhat confusing interpretation of the relevant clauses of the rules. So let us try to clarify this issue. Why waffle markings are needed. The problem of traffic jams in large Russian cities is becoming more and more urgent every year. And it's not just the fact that when designing megacities, such issues were considered without taking into account the possible multiple increase in traffic density. Traffic jams occur even in those new urban areas that have been built relatively recently. Obviously, the ever-increasing number of cars on the roads and the poor culture of our drivers, who have to spend a considerable part of their lives on the road, have an impact. Passing intersections, which by definition are the main sources of long automobile queues, is of particular relevance. Most drivers who are in the immediate vicinity of an intersection solve the problem of its quick passage in the usual way. They drive out in the middle, expecting to skip after the red signal of the traffic light. In many cases, they do not have time to complete the maneuver, creating obstacles for traffic in the cross direction. The traffic police had 2 ways of unloading the intersections. Inspectors were sent to the busiest ones, making manual adjustments. In addition to traffic signals, preventing cars from driving out on flashing green. This technique was called chopping tails. Alas, there are much more intersections in any big city than traffic police officers. The task was simplified with the appearance of video fixation systems. However, even here it took a lot of work to connect the inclusion of cameras with the red signal of the traffic light. However, if you go to the intersection while the light is still green, the responsibility in the form of a fine does not come. But even such actions often led to a complete blockage of traffic. The car went to the intersection waiting for a convenient opportunity to turn left, and they're stuck for several minutes, wreaking new havoc. The new Waffle road marking, which regulates the rules for passing busy traffic junctions, is designed to solve this problem. A vehicle cannot stop in the zone of the yellow grid regardless of the color of the traffic light, freeing the center of the intersection and simplifying its passage. Corresponding changes in the traffic rules are formalized in the form of paragraph 1.26, which reads as follows. The corresponding marking of yellow color serves to indicate the section of the road surface on which drivers are prohibited to enter when there is a jam of many vehicles ahead, and its departure on the waffle iron will force the car to stop, thereby preventing the flow of traffic in the perpendicular, transverse direction, except when the car turns left/right. The marking consists of yellow lines intersecting at right angles, forming a grid framed by a black border. How does waffle marking work? The principle is very simple. When a vehicle enters the area with a yellow grid, the camera records the time on the waffle marking. And if it exceeds 10 seconds, it is considered that the driver has violated the rules and can be fined. On the fact that you are approaching such a section of the road, warn sign 1.35 waffle marking, indicating that the road has introduced appropriate restrictions and work means of fixation. Read also, the best additives designed for power steering on cars, how to properly move in the waffle zone. Alas, the new road markings, despite good intentions, turned out to be imperfect. It turned out to be quite easy to violate traffic rules when crossing such an intersection, even without malicious intent. Often a Drivers simply cannot physically leave the intersection after entering it on green because of the dense oncoming traffic. Staying on it, he will block the passage of cars moving in the cross direction. The most interesting thing is that drivers will be penalized under Article 12.13 of the Administrative Offenses Code, which has been present in traffic rules for quite a long time, but before that it was not applied due to the lack of boundaries that would limit the prohibited zone. Now there are such boundaries on the road, waffle markings, and the legal conflict has lost its uncertainty. So what should you do to avoid getting into trouble? Because on your way to work during rush hours you will have to pass more than one such intersection? Here are some useful tips. Make sure you have time to complete your maneuver before the red light turns on. It is not excluded that you will leave the forbidden zone not entirely, but even the rear bumper, fixed by the camera, will be enough to issue a chain letter. Yes, there are cases when traffic police officers adjust the fixing equipment with a slight delay, but it is very rare and only in the regions. Refuse to make U-turns at intersections. It is impossible to perform such a maneuver in busy traffic without stopping, which means that the risk of staying on the waffle iron increases many times over. Experts note that in heavy traffic it may not be possible to correctly pass the road marking waffle iron because of the following. Collision. Let's say you intend to turn left and you are sure that you have time to do it. Having entered the grid marking, you let oncoming traffic pass, where there are also those who want to turn left, in relation to your car, to the right. As a result, a jam occurs outside the intersection, and then your plans may be ruined. Your car will get stuck and will be in the field of view of a photo or video camera when it is allowed to stop on grid markings. There are no rules without exception. Stopping on waffle markings is allowed if you need to let pedestrians crossing the street in a crosswalk. It is also permissible to stop to allow a bicyclist making a turn to pass. Of course, stopping to let oncoming traffic pass when the traffic signal is green will not be penalized either. When it is forbidden to enter an intersection with mesh markings. The traffic rules state that the prohibition to drive on the road section with marking 1.26 is valid in cases when there is a traffic jam along the car's course, which does not allow you to complete the maneuver before the forbidden traffic signal lights up, because you will create an obstacle for traffic traveling in the perpendicular direction. In practice, this means that you should not drive onto the waffle iron in the following cases. If you are driving straight ahead, but there is already a car planning to turn left at an intersection with waffle markings. If you are planning to turn left yourself, but there is a traffic jam ahead, you want to turn around. At the intersection, such a maneuver without stopping is prohibited. What is the penalty for violating the passage of the waffle iron? Cases when the driver can be penalized for violations related to the passage of the road section with marking 1.26 are prescribed. In the traffic rules, if you are driving straight ahead and a jam has formed ahead in the direction of the car's movement, if you are turning left/turning around, this is not a violation. If you have stopped at marking 1.26 and thereby created an obstacle for cars traveling in the perpendicular direction. But there is a subtlety here that not everyone realizes. A fine for stopping on a waffle marking will only follow if both conditions of each of the points are met. In other words, if you stopped on the grid marking because of the resulting traffic jam, but at the same time other participants of the live journal did not interfere, then the penalties under the relevant article of the Administrative Code will not follow. Read also how the microprocessor-based ignition system of the car is organized and works. This interpretation is available in paragraph 12.2 of the rules, but it is set out so intricately that most readers lose the meaning of the beginning of the phrase, reaching its middle. Many people are interested in the question, what is the penalty for driving on a waffle marking and whether the decisions can be made in an automated order, without requiring consideration of each case by an inspector of the traffic police? We answer, the fine for this violation is 1,000 rubles, regardless of the region. This is the amount that both Muscovites and Vladivostok residents will have to part with. As for the second half of the question, the answer is positive. Yes, letters of happiness are already being sent out in full swing, and the participation of a traffic police officer in this process is no longer required. Whether the discount is valid. The Code of Administrative Offenses has a specific list of articles that do not fall under Article 32.02, Part 1.03, which allows a 50% discount if you pay the fine within 20 days from the date of issuance of the order on the fine. The term should not be confused with the date of entry into force of the order. So, in this list of violations under Article 12.13 of the Administrative Offenses Code are not listed, and you can get away with half the amount if you do not delay in repaying the debt. Is it possible to avoid punishment? Innovations in traffic rules rarely ever went smoothly. The case with the waffle maker was no exception. Today, a year after the introduction of paragraph 1.26 of the traffic rules, there are still subtleties related to the possibility/impossibility of applying this paragraph of the rules. What is this enforcement nuance? The fact is that technical means that record violations are not in principle able to correctly determine whether a particular car has created an obstacle or there is no such obstacle. And many other aspects, recognizing a maneuver, fixing the stopping of a vehicle, remain in doubt. Modern cameras are not endowed with the appropriate artificial intelligence. But this does not mean that you will be able to prove in court that the decision to impose a fine is unlawful, so the best strategy for driving through waffle intersections is not to stop at the grid markings at all. In this case, the camera will have no pretext to fix your car. The second nuance, which is often recalled by auto lawyers, is the lack of definition of the term jam in the traffic rules mentioned in the notorious paragraph 13.2. In other words, discrepancies may arise at the level of interpretation of this concept. A jam can be considered one car or several, and their specific number is not stipulated by the rules. The driver should remember the following. If you stopped on the yellow grid marking to prevent a collision with other vehicles, i.e., to avoid an accident, such a stop is not a violation. If you plan to turn left/right without violating any of the provisions of the rules, this is also an unpunishable action. You can appeal against the ruling by referring to any of these points, but one statement is not enough. You will need to provide evidence. For example, recordings from a video recorder. However, the court may also consider the records made by external video cameras, and if they confirm your guilt, you will have to pay the fine. Whether the novelty will take root, it is difficult to say today. It is not excluded that the wave of resolutions will be stopped by the drivers themselves, who will start to appeal against the decisions made by the means of automatic fixation. In any case, the innovation does not cope with the main task, to reduce congestion on city roads. So, there is a probability that the waffle marking appeared with another purpose, to fill the budget with funds of car owners. In conclusion, understanding waffle markings on the road is essential for both drivers and pedestrians. These markings serve as important indicators for traffic management and safety, helping to regulate the flow of vehicles and prevent congestion. By being aware of their purpose and adhering to the rules associated with them, we can contribute to safer roadways for everyone. Remember to stay alert and informed, as this knowledge not only enhances your driving experience, but also promotes a more orderly and efficient transportation system. Thank you for watching, and drive safely.